is CNN Breaking News.
President Trump and his allies continue to attack the Russia investigation and the FBI. One Republican congressman taking things a step further.
I'm very concerned that the DOJ and the FBI, whether you want to call it deep state or what, are kind of off the rails. Well, I don't want to discredit them. I would like to see the directors of those agencies purge it and say, look, we've got a lot of great agents, a lot of great lawyers here. Those are the people that I want the American people to see and know the good work's being done, not these people who are kind of the deep state.
All right, let's discuss this with former Republican governor of New Hampshire, John Sununu. He was also the former chief of staff to President George H.W. Bush. Good morning, Governor.
Morning, Allison. I hope you had a great Christmas.
I did, thank you, and you
Good.
as well. Is
you.
the FBI the deep state?
Well, I think what is of concern is not the rank and file at the FBI. It's all these strange pieces of information that have come out in the last couple of months about current leadership and certainly former leadership under the Obama administration. And there is, I think, honest and real concern that the FBI somehow got dragged into the political process. I hope it ends up being the fact ends up being that they were not, but I do think that people at least have to satisfy themselves on what happened there.
So let's talk about that. So Andrew McCabe, James Comey, the general counsel, Jim Baker, they are the deep state?
I don't like using the phrase deep state. I think they have to at least explain what they did on issues like the dossier, what they did on starting the investigation as early as a year ago on the Trump campaign, as they ought to explain whether or not the dossier was used to get a FISA warrant. These are specific questions that have to be answered. And I think the answers they gave the congressional committees of dodging answers and saying we can't talk now while the IG investigation is going on has heightened the concerns that people have about those real specific possibilities of interference in the election process. You
brought up the dossier. So just to remind people, that is the infamous dossier which contained some salacious details, which CNN has never reported or corroborated. But much of the dossier has been corroborated. Do you not accept that? I
don't agree with that, Allison.
This is our reporting, and this is what crime-fighting agencies have said, that the FBI would not have just taken a dossier to the FISA court and used that as their predicate for the surveillance. They had to corroborate it themselves. That's how they operate.
I would hope that that's what happened, Allison, and all they have to do is explain that that was the case.
But do you not believe that that was the case? I mean, listen, you were.
They have refused to. They have refused to answer that question. Rosenstein and Wray were asked specific questions about the dossier, and they dodged it.
Well,
and I think
listen,
it is their dodging of an answer.
They didn't want to disclose it. Just one second. They didn't want to disclose it in an open hearing.
Okay. Well, look, as I said, I am not one who wants to assume that there's something nefarious that went on, but I do want to hear answers so that any concerns that are out there can be cleared up, because the FBI is too significant an asset to this country to allow the uncertainty of its intentions to continue.
But just so that we're clear, at the moment, do you agree with Donald Trump that the FBI is tainted?
I agree that there are questions that have to be answered about the past and current leadership in the FBI.
And do you feel that the FBI is somehow some sort of hive of liberal leaders that are trying to bring down the president?
I agree that there is some evidence that there were some strange things happening there. And I think the FBI leadership should come back with answers.
Such as
what?
It is
their failure to answer questions that has created the concern.
What jumps out at you?
If they answer the questions and provide the information, I think a lot of this will go away.
And what do you think is the weird stuff?
I think the emails, the texting between FBI leadership on attacking Trump.
Right. So they were reassigned. Just to be clear, let's just take it one at a time. So you're talking about Peter Strzok and the woman that he texted, who was an FBI lawyer. They were reassigned, taken off the investigation. Okay. So has that been handled to your
No,
liking?
no, it hasn't. I think the fact that the FBI leadership refused to answer a very simple question: did you pay for any of the dossier? They refused to answer that. That creates doubt. I think the fact that within the FBI there was some activity that suggested that they were investigating Trump as an insurance policy on the election. All those questions have to be answered. I'm not saying that they don't have answers. I'm saying they should give the answer.
I understand. It's the text that you're talking about from Peter Strzok where some insurance policy was mentioned, and that does seem to be what President Trump and many Republicans are now sort of hanging their hat on. They want to know what that is because that obviously raises eyebrows. Do you think that President Trump's attacks on the FBI, calling them tainted, is that appropriate for a president? Because it does, let's face it, trickle down to the rank and file and undermine their work.
I think the president made very clear what his position on the rank and file is when he addressed the graduating class of the FBI members and underscored the fact that he considers them tremendous assets to the country and he has their back.
Do you think that Robert Mueller's Russia investigation is legitimate?
I think any investigation is legitimate, but I think Mueller ought to wrap it up because in a whole year, he has failed to provide a single scintilla of information or evidence that there was any substance to the concern about collusion with the Russians.
There have been 4 indictments and 2 guilty pleas. Isn't that a scintilla?
On issues completely unrelated to the Russia investigation.
Well, it was about lying
on issues
to people.
On issues of personal failures of Mr. Manafort and issues of a personal failure of General Flynn.
Robert Mueller hasn't had the investigation for a year. It's been less than a year. But so obviously during that time, there have been these 4 indictments and 2 guilty pleas. And now we understand that Michael Flynn is cooperating. So you think that's it? It should be case closed? Or do you think that there will be more that comes out?
I think if there's more to come out, Mueller should put it out. If there's no more to come out, Mueller should wrap it up.
Can he take a few more months?
He probably will.
All right. Governor Johnson Nunu, always great to get your perspective on all of this. Thanks so much for joining us on New Day.
Thanks, Allison.
Bill.
Our president.
This is CNN Breaking News.
President Trump made former President Obama's golf game a recurring theme at his rallies.
Obama, it was reported today, played 250 rounds of golf.
Everything's executive order because he doesn't have enough time because he's playing so much golf.
Obama ought to get off the golf course and get down there.
I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to go play golf.
He played more golf last year than Tiger Woods.
This guy plays more golf than people on the PGA Tour.
I love golf. I think it's one of the greats, but I don't have time. But if I were in the White House, I don't think I'd ever see Turnberry again. I don't think I'd ever see Doral again.
But I'm not going to be playing much golf, believe me. If I win this, I'm not going to be playing much golf.
Whoopsie daisy, times have changed. According to our count from witnesses, Wednesday marked the president's 86th day at one of his golf courses since taking office. Let's discuss with CNN political commentators Anna Navarro and Scott Jennings. Great to see you guys. Scott, why doesn't the president like spending time at the White House? Why does he need to leave and go golfing so much?
Well, good question. I think if I were the president, I'd be at the White House all the time. It's a magical place. But the reality is,
said. As you
most
recall,
presidents
he said almost those exact same words when he didn't like that President Obama was golfing.
Yeah. Look, most presidents go on vacation. In fact, most presidents spend quite a lot of time outside the White House, whether that's at the ranch in Crawford if you're George W. Bush, or at Camp David, or in Hawaii if you're Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama spent 11 or 12% of his days in the White House golfing as well. Presidents do get out of the office. The reality is, though, when you're the president, you take it with you. You're never not the president. This is one of those jobs that follows you wherever you go. The apparatus follows you.
Sure.
You have decisions to make, phone calls to take. So whether he's on the golf course or sitting in the Oval Office, being the president follows you around, and he never truly ever escapes it.
I totally agree. You are still the president, even when you're on the golf course. The question is, why did President Trump asphyxiate on it with President Obama so much? Does that not ring of some hypocrisy to you, Scott.
Yeah, it does, actually. And, of course, a lot of things that are said in political campaigns, in the heat of campaigns, that sound great at the time. Once you get into a particular office, they don't sound so great in retrospect. So I'm sure we could pick apart a lot of statements that candidates in both parties have made. This is certainly one that's easily picked on. But the reality is what is said in a campaign, frankly, by someone who didn't have a lot of experience with government offices, particularly at this level, probably, now he wishes perhaps maybe he hadn't said it.
Anna, how do you see it?
Well, look, first of all, I'm a little uncomfortable dogging people out for playing golf because I think the man I live with is probably on his way to play golf right now.
But he's not president,
said,
or is he?
No, listen. The problem here is this. Is that Bill Weir laughing? Because I hear he's coming down south for
yes,
for New Year's. And Bill, if I see you with a golf club, I'm going to take a picture.
Oh, no.
Well, who can blame him? Look at this weather, guys.
Yeah, I was tired of being angry for 5 hours at a time, so I quit golf. But please, go on.
This, reeks of hypocrisy. Really, he looks like the hypocrite in chief. And it's not even just about golf. It's about everything. There's practically a tweet or a statement from Trump that negates something he has said or some criticism he has waged at somebody else daily. Yesterday, it was Kwanzaa. He used to criticize President Obama for celebrating Kwanzaa and marking Kwanzaa. Yesterday, he was doing it. Good. He should. But look, on the golf part, I think there's several things here. First is the ethical implications. Then it's the policy implications. And then it's the optics. On the ethical, it's not only that he's playing golf, it's that he's playing golf at his own private golf course, staying at his own private
And
club,
what's the problem with that?
Because
we do have, hold on, Anna, because we do have the numbers here. So he has spent 86 days at playing golf, or at golf properties, and 111 days spent at his own Trump properties. So what's the problem?
I'll tell you what the problem is. Well, first of all, the cost to taxpayers going into his pocket. Second of all, he is hiking up the prices at places like Mar-a-Lago, hiking up the prices to go there for New Year's because people get to rub elbows with the president of the United States. So he is turning being president into a marketing tool for his own private properties.
Okay. So hold on, let me bring in Scott. Let me bring him in on that point. Does that make you uncomfortable that he's profiting from this, Scott?
Look, I think of all the things going on in this world, it's one of those issues that the most ardent Trump haters like to bring up, but I think the average person doesn't really fixate on it that much. Frankly, we elected a president knowing full well that he was in the luxury hotel business. I mean, what do we expect? The guy was going to be staying at the Motel 6. The man loves hotels, and he loves golf. So I'm not surprised that he's staying at his own hotels and playing golf.
And
I know there are
lawsuits
going on around the emoluments issue, but I just don't think average people care all that much about where he's staying. So you don't think that
the average people care about the naked hypocrisy of what he said on the campaign trail, and now that he's golfing, he's on tap to golf way more than President Obama ever did. President Obama, you talked about his vacations. President Obama, by CBS's count, had 328 days outside of the White House. As we saw, Donald Trump has already had 111 days in his first year. He is going to outpace the Obama 8 years if he keeps it up at this pace in the space of at least 3 years. The point is, so the naked hypocrisy doesn't bother you, and the president profiting on the office of the president doesn't bother you.
I didn't say the hypocrisy doesn't bother me. I certainly don't really, as somebody who's consulted candidates, when I hear people say things in campaigns that I know could come back to haunt them when they win the office, it does make me cringe. On the profiting issue, I don't know that he's profiting. I mean, he has said that he is divested from his businesses. He has said that he has taken steps to separate himself from his businesses. Again, we elected someone who was in the luxury resort and hotel business.
Wait a second.
I mean, I doubt anybody thought he was not going to stay at those. And so this was known, I think this was known before he was elected.
Anna, he's not divesting from his businesses. The sons are controlling the Trump empire.
Of course he's not divesting from his businesses. And, he's still very much engaged in it. It's part of his family. He is also profiting from this tax cut, even though he's not showing us his tax returns. We all know that. So you either take it or you don't. But it's very hard to argue that he is not profiting from this in one way or another, and he is constantly marketing his brand as part of being president. We saw it even, earlier in the year when we saw government agencies do it in their own websites. But then there's also the policy implications. Basically, playing golf takes, as Bill said, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, depending on how slow you are and how much time you spend in the après golf. And it's 7 hours a day that he's not working, which, by the way, for me, it's just fine, because I'd rather he be on a golf course than in the Oval Office banning transgenders and banning Muslims and ending DACA and giving himself a tax cut. So as far as I'm concerned, put a bumper sticker behind on the beast that says, I'd rather be golfing and stay there for as long as you can, baby.
We've come full circle on this. So friend or foe golfing, I'm not sure anymore. Scott Jennings, Anna Navarro.
Let him golf.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. Phil, you're enjoying this?
That could be the re-election slogan.
I'd rather be golfing.
I will play 36 holes a day if you put me back in the White House. A Virginia House seat still in...
This is CNN Breaking News.
President Trump taking aim at top officials in the FBI in a series of tweets over the holiday weekend. The president and Republicans argue that the FBI is politically biased. Joining us now is former Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Allison. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well. So is this the strategy of the Trump administration now? It's no longer, he's not going to fire Bob Mueller, which is what Democrats are worried about. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts, so that by the time Mueller releases any sort of finding, well, it's tainted.
Well, I've said all along that the president's not going to fire Director Mueller. I don't see any reason why he should. I think the director has to get control of his investigation. I think also the president is taking it upon himself, I think successfully, pointing out the very obvious bias that some members of the investigation and former members of the investigation have.
Well,
I think the person that's most upset, go ahead, Allison.
Well, the former members of the investigation. I mean, when you say that Bob Mueller has to get control of it, hasn't he? He's reassigned those folks. When he saw a tweet that seemed to be anti-Trump, he reassigned them and got them off the investigation.
Right, text between two of the members of his investigation who are having an illicit affair. But at the same time, we have Weissman, who's a senior member of the investigation, who was sending similar emails to Sally Yates, the former member of the Department of Justice, and also attending Hillary Clinton's victory party. It's not that Mueller's done nothing about this. In fact, he was very quick to fire Strzok, and Strzok's lover was reassigned as well. I think that the president is highlighting this bias so that the bias stops. Weissman is still there, and I don't know why he's still there. But the American people, look, go ahead.
So because he went to Hillary Clinton's victory party, he needs to be gone. And then, is that it? Then can the investigation move forward?
As long as there's no more bias, and I think that we're getting to the bottom of that. I think also Congress should be able to access the problem with Strzok's firing is that the investigation was stonewalling Congress as to why he had been fired. I understand that it was politically sensitive. They were trying to play the political game. But the problem we have here is that the FBI appears to be inherently political, inherently biased. I think the director has done a good job with Strzok. He should have been more forthcoming about why he fired Strzok. I think Weissman needs to be gone. And I think, the director is moving forward resolutely to conclusion here.
But I mean, listen, Michael, it's just absurd on its face to think that the FBI is some den of lefty liberals. It just doesn't hold water. As you know, I mean, the people leading the investigation are Republicans, and the FBI is a crime-fighting organization that I think if you did a poll, most people would say that they were Republicans. It's just not the lefty organization that the president is painting it as.
No, I think that the people who have been called out, like Strzok and his lover, I think Weissman and others, are an anomaly at the FBI. I think most FBI agents, in fact, I know a lot of FBI agents, former and present, who I've worked with over the years, who are upset about the perception that their organization is political, and they're upset that of the behavior of some of these people at the investigation. The morale itself is a little bit low over at the FBI because of this perception, and weeding it out is probably the first thing that needs to be done.
Here's what Richard Painter said, former ethics czar, using Twitter on Christmas Eve to intimidate a witness, Andrew McCabe, in a criminal investigation is not a very Christian way to celebrate the holiday, but it does make Mr. Mueller's job easier, and that's a nice thing to do. Merry Christmas. Here's what Norm Eisen says, also ethics czar. normally someone being investigated for obstruction of justice who intimidates and threatens 3 key witnesses against him, Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Jim Baker, risks additional witness tampering charges. Do you think the president is getting himself in trouble with these tweets?
Of course not. Richard Painter was in charge of filling out forms in the White House. He wasn't much of a czar at all.
That the president is trying to intimidate these folks.
Of course he's not. And listen, as far as I'm concerned, we remember the text between Strzok and his lover talking about an insurance policy that was discussed in Andrew McCabe's office. As far as I'm concerned, the president's tweets are an insurance policy for the American people to make sure that its leading law enforcement organization remains unbiased.
Yeah, except that that's not what he's saying. I mean, he's going after these people personally. You don't think that that is somehow having a chilling effect, or that it could be in the eyes of the law?
I don't think he's going after them personally. He's going after them professionally. He's not talking about what they're doing at home. He's talking about what they're doing at work.
Well,
and
yeah,
the
but I
American
mean, he's made up nicknames for them. Leakin' Comey, you know, he has all of these nicknames for them that seem to suggest their character. But the point is that this is an investigation, and the president is inserting himself into the middle of the investigation.
Which is nothing different than what has gone on during, let's say, for example, the Ken Starr investigation. This is politics as usual. I know that's disappointing for some people, but the president is highlighting this bias to the American people for a good reason. If there's going to be an investigation, it must be unbiased, and I believe Director Mueller has done something about that, but he needs to do more.
Do you think because Andrew McCabe, deputy director, do you think because Andrew McCabe's wife had political aspirations that Andrew McCabe can't do his job?
I think it's actually preposterous that the wife of a senior member of the FBI gathered in $700,000+ in donations from political leaders who were very closely affiliated with Hillary Clinton. I think that would be a red flag that would keep Andrew McCabe from touching anything to do with Donald Trump, anything at all. But, you know, this is an odd world, and I think during the time when Hillary and Bill Clinton had a death grip on Washington, McCabe thought it was just fine. It's not just fine. American people understand that when your wife runs for office and she gets most of her donations from a political class that is highly partisan, it's something that needs to be looked at.
So if if the wife has political aspirations, that renders her husband incapable of doing his job.
Well, listen, all of us out there who are working couples, wife and husband, understand that our careers impact each other. And this one was about as partisan as you can get. Running for in a party and gathering donations from somebody indirectly and directly who is under federal investigation by the organization where her husband works. It stinks, Allison.
Yes, so
and
thankfully
the president, it's being highlighted by the president.
But you agree with President Trump that, in other words, Andrew McCabe is incapable of being impartial.
I think Andrew McCabe needs to be challenged on his impartiality. I think the president is doing that, and I appreciate those tweets. I consider them an insurance policy for America.
Okay, Michael Caputo, always interesting to get your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Allison.
Bill. Time now for the 5 things to know for your new day. Number 1, President Trump says he's ready to get back to work from his Mar-a-Lago estate today. This after a series of tweets attacking the FBI and the press over the holiday weekend.
A Christmas night scare for passengers on a JetBlue flight to Boston. The plane spun out after hitting a patch of ice upon landing, but no one was hurt.
Russian officials banning an opposition leader from running against Vladimir Putin in the upcoming presidential election. Activist Alexei Navalny being sidelined for a previous embezzlement conviction. He says it's political. He plans to appeal.
And the eldest daughter of Eric Garner, who died after a New York City officer put him in a banned chokehold, is in a medically induced coma this morning after suffering a heart attack. Since her father's death, Erica Garner has become an activist against officer abusing their power.
The Secret Service questioning a man who claims to have sent a manure-filled package to Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin over the weekend. The psychologist who says he's the sender says it was a response to the Republican tax overhaul that he says was bull blank.
It kind of upset the neighborhood in Bel Air.
Yeah, that's an unwelcome Christmas gift.
Right, right. For more on the 5 things to know, go to CNN.com/newday for the very latest.
This is CNN Breaking News.
It's expected to pass And the White House plans to celebrate President Trump's first major legislative win this afternoon. Joining us now is Congressman Sean Duffy. He's a Republican from Wisconsin. He's the chairman of the Financial Services Subcommittee. Congressman, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Allison. Thanks for having me on. And
I know.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. I know you feel you got an early Christmas present.
I do. I think America does too. So
that's great. So you're taking a bit of a victory lap today. I mean, other than this little procedural hiccup, this is going to happen. And can you just peel back the curtain for all of the viewers today on what allowed this to happen in the space of 3 months? I mean, we know the failure of the Obamacare repeal. So what was different this time? Here's what we understand. There was some sort of off-campus retreat where everybody got together and sort of got on the same page. So tell us what it looked like in the halls of Congress there.
Well, I think you have to go back even further, Allison. So this started back in 2016 when we put out our Better Way agenda. We had talked about tax reform and what tax reform should look like. We wanted to make it simpler, and we wanted to make sure it hit our corporations because they're taxed way too much, and it also goes to the middle-income Americans. So that was the first process, and then most of our attention was drawn to health care reform. That wasn't very successful, and now the second agenda item was going to be tax reform. So once health failed, the Ways and Means Committee, that's the tax writing committee, they've been working all year on tax reform. It's just that it came to light with everybody as tax reform or as health care reform was over. But yeah, we wanted to get a different environment. So to talk about what we want to do on tax reform, we wanted to get off the Hill. We wanted to go to a different location, and sometimes your venue can be helpful. But listen, a 3-month process, America's been able to read the different bills in the House and the Senate, and now the conference committee. It's been an open and transparent process that I think is going to benefit every single American family. Especially lower middle-income families.
Well, look, obviously Democrats don't think it was a transparent process. They think that a lot of this was done in the cover of night. They think that they weren't invited into the process. But listen, you guys won. Here's the problem. The latest polls, I mean, you say that Americans have had a chance to read it. They don't like what they've read thus far. The latest poll, this was out yesterday morning, shows that 55% of Americans oppose what they see in this bill. They don't like it. So why have you guys done such a lousy job of selling it to Americans, and how are you going to change that?
Well, listen, if you listen to The Hill and you listen to a lot of media sources, they'll go, oh my God, this is tax breaks for the rich and does nothing for middle-income Americans. If that was true, we would have real problems and those poll numbers would be right. That's not the truth. If you actually look back to Ronald Reagan in the 80s when he passed tax reform, it had lower approval ratings than this package. But the truth is, when people start to see they have more money in their paychecks because of tax reform and they see the economy grow, they're going to love it. So look at, what did the Democrat Party say about tax reform? Well, it didn't come to pass. What Republicans were saying actually happened for me and my family. I got more money. So I think in the long run, because more money goes to families and you're going to see better economic growth, this is going to be a winner for America, but also those of us who voted for tax reform.
I mean, the truth also is, Congressman, that corporations do get a huge benefit, arguably the biggest benefit from this, by having their tax rate lowered so much. And you seem to be putting a lot of faith, or stock, I should say, in the goodwill of corporations, that there's going to be a trickle-down effect. And that hasn't always been true. And I'm not sure what you're pinning your faith on, because even CEOs haven't said that they're going to spread this around to higher wages of their workers.
Well, I'll point to a couple of basic facts. I think it's a good point, Allison, but I would disagree with you in the sense that even Barack Obama, not a trickle-down economics guy, not a conservative, he said the 35% corporate rate was too high. He thought we should have got to 25%. We're at 21%. So we're not far off even where Barack Obama was. When you see American corporations that pack up and leave and go to other countries because of tax rates, we might go, that's not a big deal. But they take jobs from American families away from them when they leave. And so I want to make sure that though the average rate in the industrialized world might be just below 20%, when we go to 21% with our corporate rate, American families win. When American businesses compete, that means jobs and better salaries for the American people. Now, I can't specifically point to what CEO is going to do what. All I know is when they have more money and they can bring that money home, they'll reinvest, they'll innovate, they'll create in our economy, which means our families prosper.
Hopefully. I mean, hopefully they'll do that. But the truth is, hold on, Congressman, the truth is they've been sitting on record profits. They're sitting on cash right now. They're flush with cash. Our big corporations, they're not cash strapped, and they haven't been raising wages And they haven't been necessarily investing into this. I mean, you know, there was this moment where Gary Cohn, one of the top White House economic advisors, he was at this conference of CEOs, and they were asked point blank, what are you going to do if you get a tax cut with all of your profits? And he expected them to say just what you're saying, and they didn't. Watch this moment. Watch this moment.
If the tax reform bill goes through, do you plan to increase investment, your company's investment, capital investment? Just a show of hands, the tax reform goes through? Okay.
Why aren't the other hands up?
Why aren't the other hands up?
I'm sure you probably can't see that, but there was a smattering of half-hearted hands about reinvesting in the company and capital investments. And you heard Gary Cohn there being like, why aren't other hands going up? Is it possible you're giving corporations too much credit in what they're going to do with all their money?
Well, Barack Obama and I are giving corporations credit together, a bipartisan move, because we do think they reinvest. And just look at history, Allison. Whether it was JFK with tax reform, Ronald Reagan, or George Bush, you saw economic growth that happened in America. And you saw that our families do better.
Hold on, Congressman. That's not true. As you well know, listen, I think the Bushes would tell a different story. It's not true that every time you lower taxes, the economy booms. It's just not true. Sometimes when you raise taxes, the economy booms, as it did with Clinton. And as you know, George H.W. Bush had to raise taxes because there were problems from having lowered taxes. So it doesn't always work the way you're saying it does.
Allison, I'm going to throw something by you. Your viewers, because they're smart viewers, have probably heard of things called inversions, where American companies buy a smaller foreign company and they move their headquarters overseas because of taxes. And when I hear Democrats talk about, well, China's eating our lunch in a massive debt, we are losing in a global competition. How does an American company compete when our company pays 35% in tax and an Irish company pays 12% in taxes? Their profits are eaten up. They can't reinvest it. And if you think that we can compete and win, I know you're asking me questions, but if viewers think that you can compete and win when you're paying 3 times as much in taxes, we're going to lose in America. I want to make us competitive again. This has to be the best home for capital in the world. We have the smartest, brightest, hardest working people. But if you can't invest capital and keep more of it in America, you're going to go somewhere else. And we've seen that happen. Yeah. Let's make sure money comes back and is reinvested here. And I think this is going to be a good thing. And listen, you made the point well. We're staking our future on this. And I think that history dictates, and this economy has dictated, that you lower regulation, you let people spend more of their money as opposed to bureaucrats in Washington, where I'm at right now. We do better as a country, and families do better. So I think this is going to work.
Okay, a couple more questions. Have you read the entire 120-page bill?
So I've read, I can't say every word. I've read wide swaths of it and summaries on others.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Listen, I know that this has all happened so fast. I mean, and I know that this is dense stuff. But, you know, will you get a chance to read all 120 pages of it soon?
Listen, it's a small text. Some of it gets complicated, so I got to go, let's make sure I understand how this is working. And this is why some summaries and conversations are helpful, because tax code is complicated. But that's an unfair assessment. When you look at, things that happen behind closed doors, if you do look at Obamacare, Nancy Pelosi wrote it, and you had to pass it to find out what's in it.
And that's the same thing that's happening, Congressman. It sounds eerily similar. By the way, my producer just told me 520 pages. So that's the same thing. You guys are saying the same thing. You guys are saying, hold on, to the American public, you're really going to like this after we pass it. You don't like what you've seen so far, but let us pass it, and then you'll find out exactly what it's going to mean.
So, but you have to, Obamacare, they actually brought the bill to the floor, and members saw it as it went to the floor. That's why Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass it so you can find out what's in it. There was a 4-day hearing in the House Ways and Means Committee. 4 days, all day long, over a month ago. The bill text has been out there for a long time for people to read.
I understand, but you still haven't been able to read all of it.
But to say that this hasn't been out there, the American people can't analyze it. If you wanted to read it, or your viewers wanted to read the whole text word for word and not big swaths and certain summaries of others, you could do it.
But you haven't
done
Obamacare,
you couldn't. Listen, wait, Allison, you said that this bill was done under the cover of darkness. We're talking about the process. The process has been going on for well over a month. I watch your show. You've been talking about the different specifics of our bill for over a month. So how could it be behind closed doors when you and
I'm saying Democrats say that, not I. I don't know how it's done. I mean, I know what you say, but Democrats say that they felt cut out.
All I know is I watch your show and you talk about it, and you guys have talked about it for over a month, so you got to have the details of our plan to do that, which you have. And,
I appreciate that plug, but I'm telling you that Democrats like Joe Manchin say that they felt cut out, that they wanted to be a part of it, that they felt they could deliver a bipartisan thing. But anyway, my point is that you say you haven't even had a chance to read the whole thing.
No,
so
listen,
how do we expect Americans to have done that?
So hold on a second. There's parts of the bill that I can read and understand. There's other. Listen, tax code gets very, very complicated, and as you're dealing with international companies, and so on some of those more complicated portions, I read some summaries, so I want to make sure I understand it. And unless you're a tax expert, some of the stuff gets to be very, very deep, and that's why I've chose to deal with the legislation the way I have. But the point is, this is different than the thousands of page bills that came out on the floor and voted on day one, and it was done through the leaders, Nancy Pelosi, as opposed to ours, which has gone through regular order. So anyway, I think the process has been open. And listen, we should have been able to get Joe Manchin. That would have been great to get Joe Manchin. But sometimes there's a resist movement going on in America. People, don't want to give Donald Trump a win, even though it's going to help the American people. And so a lot of Democrats, because their base will go after them if they work with Republicans, I'm seeing that all the time right now, they don't want to get involved in the conversation.
I hear you, but I don't think that wasn't Joe Manchin's position.
Yeah,
but I hear you.
I agree with you.
I understand, Congressman. We always appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective and your position. It's really helpful to get it. Congressman Sean Duffy, thank you very much.
Thanks, Allison. Have a good morning.
You too. So we fact check in real time here. So just to clarify, President Obama's plan would have lowered the overall corporate tax rate from 35% to 28% and lowered the effective corporate rate for manufacturers to 25%, which is what the congressman was talking about. Okay, there you go.